Okay, if everybody's settled in with a seat, looks like we have a full group tonight, so thanks for being here this evening, everyone. We'll go ahead and start the April 25th work session for the Hudsonville Public Schools Board of Education. So we start off, we call in the work session to order. All board members are present with the exception of Chad Tuttle, who's in Chicago tonight. So to start off with, may I have approval of the agenda, please?
So moved.
Motion by Dawn. Support by Larry, sorry.
I'd like to make one motion though for an adjustment to the agenda based on legal counsel's advice. I'd like to request that we move item number 6, the second life max settlement, into closed session for discussion on the legal matter.
Okay, so can I have a motion? So we have a motion on that. Can I have a second on that motion?
So moved.
Support from Barb. Any questions or comments on that motion? We'll take action on that.
I have no idea what that is about. Why would it be in closed session?
It's a legal matter regarding that dispute, financial dispute with the company that our attorney has suggested we have that conversation in closed session based on the legal matter.
Construction issue?
No.
Other questions or comments, clarifications? Okay, all in favor of that motion, please say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Okay, next we have a motion on the table then to approve the agenda with that amendment. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor of that motion to approve the amended agenda, please say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. Okay. Next we have recognition of visitors and hearing of people present. So we have a few folks that would like to address the board or talk to the board this evening. So first up, we have Jennifer Dougherty. And again, you may stand at your seat and we'll get our timer up here. Again, please limit comments to 3 minutes. Address comments to the board, and we'll get going when Dr. Van Jack says we're set to go. You good? Okay.
I kind of missed the podium. It feels so official. Okay, so good evening.
Good evening.
Like many parents, I'm concerned about some of the books that have been admitted into our students' classrooms. While you do have some 18-year-old students in the high school, the vast majority of students that parents have entrusted your teachers to educate are minors. Allowing teachers to present sexually explicit and violent books to our students is alarming. I appreciate the fact that parents have brought some titles to your attention. After reading passages from Half a Yellow Sun, I'm thankful that the book was removed from the book club. It is disturbing that multiple copies are still available to students in the classroom library, the very classroom that my daughter is in each day. If some parents want to allow their children to read books like this, that is at their discretion. The books are available at public libraries, on Amazon, on Audible. They are not being banned from society, but do they need to be available at the high school? Is sexual violence written in detail something that we want to put in front of our children? If this were in a video format, you couldn't possibly show it to students. Are we not supposed to be concerned with the imagery that these books put in their minds? I have heard these books defended by some teachers because they have deemed them to have literary value. Literary value at what cost? There are so many books with literary value out there. There is no need to select ones that depict explicit sexual content. We need you, our board members, to ensure that good judgment is used when bringing books into our schools. We are all aware of the push for social emotional learning in our schools. I find it ironic that the administration is pushing for emotional intervention in our classrooms and at the same time defending their teachers' use of age-inappropriate books in schools. Violence, rape, explicit sex. Could these books be contributing to the emotional issues facing our children? It is certainly a question we should be asking.
Thank you for your comments. Next, Gwen Snowy.
Good evening. At the NEA's General Assembly in 2019, these goals were set. Teach white fragility, promote Black Lives Matter, teach climate change, end criminalization of border crossings, lobby for LGBTQ curriculum, lobby for protections based on the sexual orientation and gender identity, promote the fundamental right to abortion, assert U.S. illegitimacy, and white supremacy. These aren't academic goals. A motion for the MEA to make student learning the top priority was defeated. These goals are showing up in our school district in 2022. They align with Karl Marx, who prescribed eliminating the natural family, eliminating individuality, abolishing religion and morality, abolishing individual nations, erasing history, and ending personal property rights. Most universities, the textbook industry, the American Library Association, the National Council of the Teachers of English, our intermediate school district, and some of our staff have aligned with these goals. This has in fact become their religion. Our staff is free to embrace these beliefs personally, but they are not free to impose them on our children. You have 7,000 Hudsonville school children under your care. Thousands of these children come from homes that believe in God and the Bible. Even many who do not attend church still believe, not because we're under the fist of God, but because we believe that God's ways are the path to a full and beautiful life. Contrary to what some people believe, it's perfectly okay to be a Christian in the Hudsonville Public Schools. Our constitutional rights to religious freedom demand that every child be able to hold their family's religious values unassaulted throughout the school day. Discerning and disabling the assault of critical race theory, hypersexualization, and disrespect for parents being forced on our kids is the hardest work that you as the Hudsonville Board will ever do. It must be done in order to make the Hudsonville Public Schools a safe and respectful learning environment for all of our children. You know how to run an excellent school system here in Hudsonville. You've done it for years. Please don't bow down to the NEA agenda. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next, we have Jen Adams.
I sent an email to the board. I was at the last work session, and I was pretty disappointed with the response from the board as to how we would try to prevent these type of books like Half a Yellow Sun in a classroom assigned reading list in the future. It seemed like there was a lot of excuses and not a lot of action. I heard in 2 separate occasions, just randomly out in the community, other people that I didn't know talking about it. And their view was that the administration feels like they just have full reign to go ahead and do these things. No one's being held accountable, so why not? Is that what we want to do here? Is feel like we're always up against the community? It just seems like there's certain board members that maybe have a bias, and anything that the parents bring up as a concern, they're just naturally going to want to fight it. And I'd like us to work together. Parents have legitimate concerns. These are explicit sexual content that we're giving to minors. If a teacher were to describe these things in class, they would be fired. You're not allowed to have sexual conversations with minors when you're an adult. So why is it okay to assign reading and then bring it up in class? It just seems like that's predatory behavior. That's all I had to say.
Thank you for your comments. Next, we have Jeanette Schutman. Okay. Hopefully I didn't miss your name too badly.
Yeah, Scheidemann is his last name.
Scheidemann, okay, thank you.
Oh, no problem. I just signed up to speak because I wanted to thank the board for disbanding many of the committees and doing the work here at the work sessions so that it's open to the public, so that the community can know what's going on. I know it makes a really long night for you guys. I've been here for a couple already, and I left before you did, so I just wanted to say thank you. That was it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Unless we have Audrey Black.
I have been coming to these for a while now, and this is my first time actually speaking in this public setting. But I just wanted to kind of share a little bit of my story because I think that there are a lot of people out there like me who tend to be on the quieter end. We want to respect people, we don't want to make a rumble, but at the same time it's so hard to watch some of these things happen to our school and our community. It's affecting our friends and our neighbors and everybody, as you guys know. We started the school at Georgetown Elementary. I think I had my daughter technically enrolled for 3 weeks, and she went for about 3 days. I started coming to these meetings because it was about the mask thing. We did the year previous at the ECC, and every time I watched her go, I thought, what the heck am I doing to my girl? Like, there's all of these, nobody knows what it's doing. Anyways, I know the mask thing is, we're beyond that now. But that is why I began coming to these meetings. And that is not the reason why I keep coming back. I feel like every time I'm here, my eyes like bug out of my head, my jaw drops to the floor. I'm so confused at what's going on. And the transparency, I don't know if there is a better way. I've been to work sessions. They seem to be set up in a very similar fashion. I don't know if there's a better way of, where you guys are able to communicate, but I agree with what you said. It seems like parents stand up here and we're begging for our kids' safety and well-being, and it's just like a sounding board, But I have since pulled my kids from Hudsonville Public. We did do homeschool this year, and we have found a massive, overwhelmingly encouraging community, and we plan to do it next year. We've already paid for our co-op, and it's non-refundable, so we're doing it. But I just wanted to, I will continue to be a part of the community. I will continue to stand up for our kids and our neighbors. But there's got to be some change. It's so messy, and it doesn't have to be this way.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, next we move on to discussion items. First up, we have administrator leave of absence.
Yeah, so we've had a request from an administrator for a leave of absence for half a year next year. Great opportunity for Mr. Matt Bear to take next fall and spend some time in another country, working with educators, working with our school system, and really taking his skills and learning. Not only, I'm sure he'll be teaching a lot, but learning a lot also. So we'd like to, at the next board meeting, there'll be a request for Matt to take a leave of absence from August 1 until we can bring him back the end of January to start back, really the second semester. We have some plans over at Riley to fill this spot. We are looking to fill the MTSS position still at Riley. Once that's filled, to find out how that person fits into the mix and go from there. So I'm not going to tell you that I know who's going to be in there right now, because we want to find out who's going to fill that role first, and then go from there. So I've asked Matt to be here tonight. If there are additional questions, maybe Matt can say a few words about what his plan is when he goes over there. I know he's anxiously, nervously excited, cautiously optimistic. There's a lot going on. It's a big family move, right? The whole family going to Denmark and spending time in Denmark. I tried to convince him that it's summer in Denmark that time of year, and he didn't buy that. So, Matt, maybe you can tell us a little bit about the
sure. Sorry, just as a community member myself, thanks to everybody for speaking. I know in regards to everything, we're all in on this, and so it's kind of awkward to step in on this conversation after that conversation happened, but I'll just say that, I've started a journey. I think in 2014, there was Ottawa County initiated something called Future Prep, which if any of you have had kids a part of or the board knows about that, it's basically a push to try to connect our curriculum to real world outside audiences and to make kids go through a process of making what they create come alive in a real, relevant, and purposeful way. So it's a process called project-based learning. It's a pedagogy I've believed in. I taught myself, and I continue as I work. I know I've been in the merry-go-round of administrative roles from Riley to Baldwin to the high school and then back to Riley. It's something I truly believe in, and I think it transforms our kids' lives when they can see what's happening in the classroom, go outside in the world and do something and be meaningful. I've continued to do this on a kind of like on a consulting basis in the summer through a company that's called the Buck Institute of Education. It's based out of California. In some of those meetings of randomly meeting other educators from around the country and around the world, I had someone reach out to me who's starting a school in Denmark and asked me to join that process of getting project-based learning off the ground at their school. My immediate response was, that's crazy, and knowing my wife, I was like, that's probably not going to be happening. And as conversations continued, and in 2020 we were doing some online services, it kind of became more of a legitimate request. And like all good things, I kind of sat back and talked with good friends and prayed about it and did the work that needs to be done with big decisions like that. And I think as my wife thought more about it, she's an Enneagram 6, if any of you do the Enneagram, so she has a plan for everything, and this was not in her plan. But it's become something that in the last couple weeks with the thoughtful work of Dr. Vanderjet and others that I consider good, dear friends, that I think it's an opportunity that we want to pursue. Again, obviously with the board's permission to allow for that 6 months to happen.
So it's a great opportunity for Matt. I think it's also a nice opportunity for the district to understand and have somebody that's maybe spent some time. We've had people that come to us that work in other districts in the area, and education looks pretty similar in the area. To have somebody that truly will immerse themselves into an educational system in Europe, I think will be a nice resource for the district also. So I wanted to bring Matt here tonight. I told him he can be early on the agenda so that he can, I think he's probably got some practice going on at 7 or 6:30 or something.
Softball games and
So, all that stuff.
dinner on the table. Yeah.
Didn't know if the board had questions, and then we'll have a formal recommendation from the board. And Matt?
Are you sure you're coming back?
We asked that question.
I revert back to a previous comment that I made. If you know my wife, yes, we are coming back. Apparently they're pretty happy over there. But it really truly is what Doug and we've had a lot of conversation about it. It's a chance to see something different. I'm excited to bring whatever's there in capacity back here. To continue to help to learn and grow the staff that I'm involved with at Riley and Hudsonville as a whole. So,
We're excited for you and your family, Matt.
thanks, Don. Appreciate it.
And you'll do just fine. And tell your wife she'll do just fine. A lot of tears probably, but she'll be just fine.
Yeah. And again, the kids are coming too. So I have a 12-year-old that is a 6th grader at Riley, and I have a 10-year-old who is a 4th grader, going to be a 5th grader at Jamestown. So it's we're going to find some happiness over there together. Forced family fun.
And we'll talk about a backfill plan.
Yeah, that could take a little bit of time, but we have some ideas. Ann's been working on it. We've had some conversation on it. We met with, obviously, Bill Ross. We've had many meetings with Mr. Ross also, talking through what this looks like. Finding the right, Matt's got some big shoes to fill. He dearly cares about these kids. We want to find the right person that can fill that role. I reached out to George Murphy yesterday and said, "You sure you don't want to do that? You're good right now."
Okay, excellent. Well, yeah, like Don said, it's an exciting opportunity, so, yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for considering. Appreciate it.
Thank you, man. All right, next item is Fieldhouse line of sight. I think we had a question or two came up after the last special work session that we had relative to the Fieldhouse, and so we're going to touch on that again and clarify that. Thank you.
So you have in front of you there's a follow-up to three questions that do have some subparts to them, along with some graphics. And the first question is, what was the sightline issue? And then I'm not going to read the whole thing, just read a couple excerpts from this. It was for people that were sitting in the top 2 rows of the bleachers. That, I mean, there are additional, you could say, but that was the primary. And then if you look at the visual of the existing building section, that illustrates that people in those bleachers, sitting or standing, would have had issues. And with the team's calculation, it was approximately 100 seats. Next question: where, and this became a larger issue as we moved along, where was it the students would be able to get their hands on the beam? And also in the graphic, you can see that, and it was roughly three rows of bleachers, and we have a lot of kids that can reach up. It's depending on if your toes are on the edge of the bleacher, your toes, you know, where you stand on the bleacher, it's roughly 6 feet up to that main girder truss as displayed there. And what was it about the site visits? Last question. What was it about the site visits that brought the problems to your attention? And I got real specific on this response. As you can see there, it really had to do with when we were in the field. We spent most of our time addressing clearance issues in the gym. We really weren't looking at this issue specifically. And when it really, I'm talking for me as a personal matter, when we sat down and looked at this the next morning is when we really said, we've got a clearance issue, a safety issue, and we've got a sightline issue. So it was really the next morning when the team got together to address that, and we looked at the visual like this. So there are other details in there, but I sent that response out Friday along with this visual and wanted to highlight the response. So any questions from that?
Well, these were my questions, and I appreciate you taking the time to look into this and give us some answers to those. I've heard it before, I just want to hear it again. This had nothing to do with the larger scoreboard that we purchased.
No, this issue did not either.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear. And in your original letter to us, you talked about looking at potential options. I like potentials.
Yeah.
Was this the only option that we had? Because I know the money is appropriated here. We want to spend it. I like to spend money we have to spend it. And even though we have money there, I hate to see us spending money. It does not have to be spent. So, any other options that we had here?
As it relates to the sightline, this specific
The whole package.
thing,
The whole package.
I would still say the raising of the 3 feet would be the correct option to solve that. We did look at several other options when we weighed that against, I think as we talked about last time, against what was installed and cost. It really makes sense to raise that, and that does resolve the sightline issue as well. Some of the other ones didn't resolve that, so it was sort of doing all those things resolved all of them. So.
And I'm not wanting you guys to feel bad.
No.
Well, maybe I do. I've been on the board a long time.
Yep.
And this is the biggest faux pas I've seen. And I know this isn't your first rodeo. So I feel bad about it. Hopefully we get this taken care of amicably, not having more problems.
Yep.
Who are we having here, by the way? We could introduce ourselves. I
Sure.
think I know.
Ben Perdock.
Ben, I know you, Ben.
Yep.
Yeah.
Luke
Luke, I know you. Yeah. This gentleman I don't know.
Aaron Sparks. Communications by design.
Okay, all right.
Number 9 on the agenda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Unrelated.
I'm not-
Yeah, unrelated.
I'll leave you out of this.
Yeah.
All right. That's all I have. Okay, thanks.
Other questions, comments from the board? Okay. All right, thanks guys for putting that together, for being here tonight to address the situation, so we appreciate that. Okay, if there's nothing else on that item, then we move on to policy additions and updates.
So we have several policies tonight we'd like to bring to the board. We'll bring this back at the May board meeting for a first reading. I'm going to go through them in the order in which you'll see them in your packet. The first policy is policy 1616. It mirrors policy 3216 and 4216, which we already have, and this mirrors that policy. So we have policies for professional staff, for certified staff and support staff, if you will. This is for professional staff. All these policies mirror each other. So this is just bringing this policy in line with the other two policies that already exist, because they're all three of those categories should have the same policy. It is the same, basically the same language, whether written or not, that brings us in compliance with Title IX and Title VII. The next policy, I know there's a guideline that's on the next page. You can look through that, but that's kind of irrelevant. Sorry, that was the policy. We put the guideline in there. It's the policy that we're really looking at. The next policy is 5511. It's with the dress and grooming policy. It's just revised, cleaned up a little bit, and put it in line with more of the other policies that we have regarding that expectation regarding dress and grooming.
Parts that are closed out, excuse me.
Yeah.
The parts that are closed out, were those recommended by Neoli?
Yeah. Some of those are selections that we did. So we have a policy already.
Yes.
So those did not exist in our current policy.
I knew they didn't because of the words.
Yep, so we crossed them out, and then the only addition would be what's in green.
But we've chosen not to use the ones that are bad.
That's correct.
Even though they were recommended.
They
I'm okay.
they weren't our current policy.
Yeah,
if that
I'm
makes
okay
sense.
leaving them out.
They weren't our current policy, so we modeled our current policy, those words weren't in there, if that
That's
makes sense. So when they give us the template,
Right.
it has language in there, not from our policy, but from the template policy.
That's fine.
So the language didn't exist in ours, so we didn't put it in the new one.
I understand, because I knew the language would not have existed in the previous policy.
Correct.
Correct.
Yep. Policy 6110 is the grant funds. This is one of the latest changes to the Educational Department General Administration Rate, which we call it EDGAR. It's just additional language for the maintenance of effort and maintenance of quality. Those are revisions that follow with EDGAR from a standpoint, if ever from an audit standpoint. Those policy changes are recommended, also in policy number 6110. And it's the same reason for policy 6114 and 6325. Same language regarding the changes to the EDGAR regulations. And so those would be, those are recommended to be adopted when we get audited. This is going to happen. So,
Makes the auditors happy.
they're very happy when that's it. So not an extensive number of policies, but ones that we'll like to bring back to the board in May. If you have questions tonight, or before the first reading, or before the second reading, or after that, just let me know, and we'll definitely take a closer look. And we can talk in more detail if you have questions about any specific policy.
So, going back to, let me just check that. I think, was there a section on student dress code?
The grooming one?
Yes, or whatever. Because is there not an administrative guideline
There is.
that goes with that?
Correct.
Okay.
All of these have administrative guidelines that are parallel to them.
Okay.
Those are guidelines that are written and modified based on administration. The policies are what drive that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So will we have an opportunity, or is that something that you can provide to us as far as the administrative guidelines?
Sure.
And I think in particular of students? Only because this has always been one of the pet peeves of mine, that if we're going to have a policy that's enforced, and if we're going to have guidelines that they're enforced, so I guess I'd kind of like to see what those guidelines might be.
Sure. I can definitely share those with the board so you can see what they are online. I mean, anybody can look them up right now. But I'll share those with the board.
Okay.
I won't bring them to the board for a reading
Yeah.
because they're not board approved, but the policy is. So between now and then, I'll make sure you have the adjacent guidelines that go with the policies so you can see how they're parallel. And if you have suggestions regarding them, please, you can bring them to us also. Those, we don't have to bring them to the full board, but if you have suggestions or comments or thoughts, please let us know.
And I don't know if I'd have suggestions, but I just feel very strongly that if we're going to have them, let's enforce them.
Sure.
Otherwise, why have them?
Sure.
So that's just my side kind of too.
Okay. Good. Other questions or comments regarding policy additions or updates? Okay, we move on to grow your own grants, number 4.
I'm going to take that.
Okay.
So I will tell you that if you want to talk about something that brought me a lot of joy, it's this. Because there's a lot of things that don't bring me joy, but finding people money that they weren't expecting, it's a really fun thing. So the Michigan Department of Education right now is trying to respond in a variety of ways to attack the teacher shortage in our state. Because it's real. When we look at, at the beginning of the year, I know you guys know this, but I'm going to say it again. At the beginning of the year when we celebrate our staff's longevity, and we have the longevity video, and we're all sitting there like, oh, and I sit there sweating. I see Riley Middle School, and the amount of teachers that are 25 years and above, and I'm sweating. So this is not just me. This is every human resource person in the state of Michigan, the principals and everything. So as a response, the Michigan Department of Education is trying to help districts kind of get more teachers out there. And they did a grant, and if any staff member that is getting a paycheck from a public school, and this could be true for privates and such. I only read public, and that's where I stopped reading, But they then are taking classes towards education or additional endorsements, or they have certifications for like Teach America, because you have to pay for different certifications through that. You could possibly qualify for this grant. And so with the hard work of Andy Secor, we were able to send this out to staff, and I will tell you that we had 18 staff members that qualified, and they range from staff that works in our ECC in the child care group, paraprofessionals, custodial staff that is currently going back to school to get their, or getting their bachelor's right now. We have teachers that went through Teach America, or they're getting additional endorsements that we need, and even some coaching staff that are getting their teaching degree. So they have to be taking a class between February 1 through August 31st. So we technically were able to verify that if they start classes for fall before August 31, they could still utilize that money. So they had to, fill out some quick forms for us. I mean, Andy and I did this in a week. Like, we found out, we gathered all the data, we got a lot of questions, and I really want to give huge kudos to my human resources cohort within Ottawa County, because we all helped each other a lot, because we all wanted to do this for our staff, so we were really sharing information, and it was just a beautiful thing to see everybody. And I know I ran into John Voss, who works for Zealand, and we were high-fiving. He got 27, I got 18. And then the best thing is we found out that the state of Michigan might do this again. And if they do, we had staff that said, well, I haven't started classes yet, but I plan to, and so we're trying really hard to be as transparent with staff as possible. Like, I can't promise you this will be here, but we're hearing it will be. That's what they're saying. The shortage isn't going away. So yeah, it was really awesome to tell some of our part-time custodial staff that are working, going to school full-time and working for us, that I just found them, tuition for the winter term. It was awesome. So you don't know how much they receive or if they qualify. We keep emailing each other back and forth within our HR cohort to see if anybody found out yet, but I just thought it was a really, really great, joyful thing to do this for staff. So, yeah.
That's good. Good. This is, there's no action that we need to take on this in the next meeting, right? This is informational, and it's good information.
Yeah, no.
But there's no action. You're forging ahead.
Yeah, and I will say this, is that we had, so this only affected people that were getting their teaching certification or getting additional endorsements with teaching, but we had staff that I had to turn down that are getting their counseling, or they're getting their social work. And so then that took us then, like Amy and I were talking about, putting pressure on our lobbyists and things like that, because because these are shortages that we have too. So it just kind of creates that ball rolling more of, you know, what additional things can you do? Because, you know, I mean, we have you know, a person right now that works for ECC and has for years in our Eagle's Nest and as a child care and is working their tail off to get their school counseling endorsement. And I mean, that's a lot of work to do that, and it's just a lot of cost. So they, you know, we're going to try to expand it more. Yeah.
Good, that's exciting. Questions, comments on that? Good, nice work.
So I would just ask you, if, you know, when you have representatives come to you and talk to you, you know, about needs of schools, tell them to grow their own. It's a great program.
Good, good, thanks, Ann. Okay, next we move on to selection of auditors. Patrick?
Yes, thanks, Ken. So just to highlight the recommendation, and we'll go into some background. So the staff recommendation for the regular board meeting will be to select Maynard Costerison of Lansing as the financial statement audit firm for the 21-22 fiscal year for $41,500. And then further, it's requested that the board name Maynard Costerison in the annual organizational listing that we do each July. So the background, the last time we changed audit firms, because we had an audit firm for at least 25 years, and the last time we changed audit firms was 3 years ago. During that process, Plant Moran was selected, and they were just a tiny bit lower than Maynard back then, and it just, both great firms. I had used Plant Moran in the past, I've never used Maynard. Maynard has a larger, let's say, saturation or just client base in the West Michigan area, but it was close, and we recommended Plant Moran. They did a nice job. This time around, we considered extending, recommending we extend a year, because the quote came with extensions. In this particular year, there are just, it's one of those where that four-letter GASB word, we've got a lot of new GASBs to implement this year, and it is challenging to get the firms to quote it. As you can see, I forwarded their proposals in the quote, and had to use some estimates from them of ranges, because it's tough for them to know how much they're going to spend on implementation of new GASBs. But the difference between fees this first year were significant. For Maynard, it's $41,500, and Plant Moran, $47,750. There are some, both firms are statewide leaders. When there are new audit requirements or just new funding things, new legislative matters, they really do invest a lot in schools in the state. They advise not only the school business group, but the superintendent's group, the grants group. They just have a lot to do. They're invested in education, and they both help a great deal. And Maynard has a pretty good, just in our area, they do have more schools than does Plant Moran. Plant Moran still has 5 or 6 in West Michigan, but Maynard has 5 or 6 just in Ottawa County. They can't count, they just have more schools in this area. Maybe that's how they can get the price there, because they're doing other work in the area. So the recommendation is to go with switch and go with Maynard. And this, we try to get a little more stability. Instead of going 3 years, go 4 years. So they gave us a 4-year quote. It's renewable year to year. And the board, if it was a situation where there was a performance issue, we don't foresee that, but it's not a 4-year contract. We just ask them to give us an idea of what their fee is going to be for 4 years.
Okay, I was going to ask you about that. If you asked for 4 years, but yet you were emotionally for 1 year. Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
When we learned a new auditor, I remember how painful that first year was for
Yes.
you guys.
Yes.
Is the delta in the quote worth that payment?
We believe so. We've used, well, just for instance, Jody in her office has had Mater at another school district she worked with. And the part of our delta last time had to do with just years and years and years with the same firm. I would say, most definitely, if we'd been with somebody for 20 years.
Is there some standard in industry as to how frequently we should change auditors?
No. No, there really isn't.
I had 25 years with an auditor.
That we were with the other auditors for a while, and they just had a change in their practice where it didn't make sense for them to continually invest in this because there's just a lot of professional development, CPE, there's a lot of things you have to do to keep up with governmental auditing and specifically auditing schools.
You're talking about Bean Garden.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just got out of business.
Yes.
No, it was a wise move to move forward from being clearly weren't in the business anymore. Having read through both of the proposals, I see comparable levels of capability. Plan Moran is a big company that works in a lot of different financial sectors.
Yes.
And to a certain extent, you're probably paying for some of that overhead, that cost associated with a firm like that. So I see that, there's a smaller, more local, based on Lansing.
Much more Michigan-based. They've got an affiliation with the BDO network, but far more Michigan-based.
Yeah.
The plant, like you said, they're opening offices in the world. You have to stay all the time.
Yeah. Can we use plant for consultants in other scenarios? Would you still consider them a viable option in the same scenarios?
Sure. Yeah, we don't have any of those projects like software on the immediate horizon, but they really did a nice job with that project.
Other questions, comments about the auditor selection? So they will, 21, 22 fees. So that'll kick off with them when?
They're going to need to get in and do preliminary work in June.
June. Okay,
Yes.
that's what they thought for their timeline. Okay. All right. Other questions or comments on the auditors? Okay. We move on to ruler curriculum.
So, as we continue to evaluate ruler and what's the best, maybe the best fit for our students in our community, Mandy and Amy had a chance to sit down with department level leaders and grade level chairs to talk a little bit about what this looks like and how can we continue to take feedback and make modifications that are needed or evaluate where we are with the curriculum. So I'd like Mandy to kind of talk through a little bit about what that looked like in the conversation that they had with the grade level chairs and leaders, and then talk a little bit about what some next steps might be as we move forward and try to figure out what is the best course of action to support all of our students and all of their needs. So go ahead, Mandy.
So last week Thursday was our second to last opportunity to meet with grade level teams at the elementary level, and so we really wanted to capitalize on that opportunity just to use the time to reflect and identify what feedback do they have related to some of the top barriers that were noted in the survey. And so those agendas were led by grade level chairs, and each of the agenda grade levels K through 5, along with the PBIS specialists and the principals that are assigned to those grade levels. And they really tried to tackle two of the top two barriers related to time and pacing, as well as resources and supplemental support. And so that grade level that grade level team time was first just crafted an opportunity for teachers to share with one another what they had found successful in terms of pulling in additional resources or visuals or read-alouds to support connection, developmental fit, and contextual fit. And so they pulled those resources into an existing electronic sharing folder to share some of their successes and to just capitalize on that, to identify then where our existing gaps. So we know what to look for if continued implementation occurs, where we need to find additional supplemental resources to target those lessons. In terms of pacing and time, this year's pacing guide really focused on 10 units for each of the grade levels, knowing that the full scope and sequence offers 18. We did that purposefully, wanting to know that in this first pilot year that we gave teachers ample time to move through those units and to really evaluate how much time each unit and lesson took. We have found that we were able to accomplish that fairly early, and so going into next school year, we can capitalize on what timing we can offer to fit in some of the other PBIS expectations that we also know we want to continue to hold up and balance with some of our social emotional lessons. The grade level chairs pose to their teams what modifications are changing to the pacing guide. What changes would you suggest just to collect feedback, as well as what additional units might be added to the next year's scope and sequence if we continue to implement. And across K through 5, they've found consensus in adding 4 additional units so that we would be scaling up from 10 to 14, knowing that if we were to continue with implementation, we move towards that 18 slowly to know that that timing worked well with what was occurring throughout the school year. So we use the term white space in the calendar to talk about just times of year when teachers would be introducing a new ruler unit. And we talk a lot about how right now when we're in the thick of state assessment, this is a time where we really want to just focus on implementation of those strategies versus reviewing a new concept. We talked about times of year between, like for example, Thanksgiving break and winter break is also a time when teachers requested some of that white space, knowing that still there would be that teaching expectation from the PBIS lesson resources, but that would be a time to introduce a new ruler concept. So really, we just allowed that to occur kind of organically from the grade level chairs seeking feedback, so that as time allows and if we continue to work towards implementation, we can pick up wherever they left off in those conversations at the upcoming May grade level meeting. But probably more importantly, there would be an opportunity for some summer conversations with our teacher leaders to make sure that teachers went into the fall with a solid sense of what that district-wide pacing guide would look like, as well as what additional resources they might be able to access to support lessons where there were some gaps. So that was that's a summary of what last Thursday sounded like.
There's a lot of opportunity here to gather more information as we work through this before we truly want to come back to the board with a recommendation. It's not a curriculum that's repeated every trimester, every semester. It's a yearly thing. So we're trying to compare apples to not knowing of what modifications will make positive impact not only on our kids but maybe on our staff also. And we're looking to see what that looks like as we progress. You can ask staff, do you want to, we asked them 3 questions last time, do you want to try something different, do nothing at all, or stay with what we have? And over half want to stay with what we have, and the other 2 questions were kind of split between the 2. But I would rather ask our staff, did we make modifications that are positive impacting students in the classroom, socially, emotionally, academically, behaviorally, all of those different components. And we're comparing it to pre, and we don't have a pre, if that makes sense. So we'd really like to ask next fall, where are we? Are you seeing progress being made with your students from that standpoint, where we were comparing it to not doing anything before? So we'd really like a year to go through and comparable data between 1 year to year 2 to say, is this really working for Hudsonville Public Schools? We can hear from other districts that say yes, but not every district's like our district. We have different expectations maybe. We have different students, different community, all those different things, factors we have to put in place to see kind of where it lands.
Couple of questions.
Yeah, please.
So the number one concern from the teachers was timing. So why would we add more units, go from 10 to 14, if timing is already an issue? Would we not want to try to keep the 10 that we have to see if the timing gets better instead of adding more?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we talked about addressing time in two ways. One was just to have more of a unified lesson length. So one of the survey questions in a previous format was related to, is 2 weeks sufficient time to move through a unit? And that answer has stayed constant in that yes. I think part of the time question just looks at instructional minutes per day, and one of the ways that we can address that is to make sure that there's sort of that maximum time length on the lesson. But even doing so, they're still able to move through a unit in 2 weeks. As far as units per year, though, what we were evaluating is at this time with 10 units, we were finished months prior to school ending. So we know we have capacity if we were in a shift where unit 8 lands per se, we are able to add units and still move through those at a progression of approximately 2 weeks per unit as we go through the school year. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and then you said the goal was to do all 18. Now, I know when we met, there were some units that we opted not to do because we didn't quite feel they were appropriate. Is that looking at including those again? Like, I know there was one in particular.
Yeah, I think that I don't know that a lesson topic was presented as not a good fit, but there were other supporting real-outs or examples that maybe were shared that we were confident we could find other examples to meet the same lesson target, and that would continue to be the same.
And then would you envision surveying the teachers like in December, January, or at the end of the next school year to get all the data? Because if you do it in the fall, they really haven't worked with it enough to really provide, I think, good feedback if we do it too early.
It would be important to gather some feedback in the fall as we transition, as we've made modifications going into the fall. There's a core group that have met, teacher leaders, department chairs, grade level leaders, they've met. But to get feedback from everybody about how this transition, maybe that's an October question. But then to see how the implementation has gone, to get parallel data, we want to do it a similar time frame to what we did this past one.
Okay.
So we can compare. And maybe the question is it getting better? Right, from the teachers that had concerns, they feel like they've been addressed.
Right,
And
because
we
I
can ask
think
at
we
the
do
same
need to
time.
ask that. Is it getting better? Is
Yeah.
time addressed?
Sure.
You know, one of the concerns I brought up in my form was they said, the second one that I had actually tied for too, not always age appropriate. Have we been able to work on things to identify if it wasn't age appropriate?
Yeah, so I think some of the examples were when posing conflict resolution strategies, maybe some of the vocabulary posed wasn't a great developmental fit. And so teachers were able to share how they were supporting that lesson with different visuals or different vocabulary that the students had, previously been exposed to, so that it wasn't developmental fit. So I think the lesson targets have remained to be appropriate. I think the tools that we use, it's kind of balancing that science and the art of teaching is like they're finding the tools to be able to deliver the lesson target in developmentally appropriate ways.
I would like to know on the survey that we do again with the teachers, I don't know if you envision using the exact same questions, but if there's a way for us to ask questions that particularly ask them about the barriers and concerns that they have identified, to try to see if we've made a difference.
Yeah.
And then again, to just ask them flat out, do you want to continue with ruler? I know last time we asked, did they want to continue with ruler? Did you want to select a different SCL curriculum, or did you not want to do anything? I guess to ask them, do you want to continue with ruler? Yes, no. Get very specific. And then what's the benchmark that we look at? Because I think you're right, we want to meet the needs of all the teachers.
And I'm on the same track. You know, the numbers that concern me are hanging around 50%, 58, 52, 56. And I'd like to see, if we're going to continue that, a significant jump in those numbers in terms of the teacher's assessment, and with a lot of specificity to it, you know, what they feel is good or feels bad about it. So I just want to invest our lives in this if it's not going to be a worthwhile program.
Nor do we. Agreed.
I think it'd be interesting too, when you're looking at what the students have learned. And for those who were second graders, you know, to have an early fall kind of informal test that says, hey, what do you remember about these particular words or common language that we talked about last year? Because ultimately, to me, that's just as important as how the teachers feel. Are the students recalling that? And do they have specific examples over the summer that they were like, hey, you know what, this happened and I remembered this particular word or how to deal with this situation, and this is how it was helpful for me or not helpful. So it would be helpful, I think, for me to know how that's appearing come fall.
That speaks to, Dawn, that speaks to also just some of the priority of moving forward with an SEL curriculum, instead of just me choosing to do whatever and Dawn choosing to do whatever, is that vertical articulation. And that applies to math curriculum, ELA curriculum, and certainly in SEL. We want to build on the skills and knowledge that students have from the previous year. And so I can see that lining up with, you know, all of the other content area that we want to see. Are students growing? Are they building on? Are they using that knowledge? And then how we build on that from year to year. And speaking to, I guess, again, back to that bigger goal of why we were looking for a larger curriculum instead of the continued kind of piecemeal of what we know teachers were doing, was trying to support their students with development of these skills in those areas.
So it sounds like we'll make some enhancements for next year. At the same time, an apples-to-apples comparison is important. So I know that's a little tricky based on some of the conversation we've had here. And again, some of the enhancements you're talking about, reflections and incorporation of those into the activity for next year. But at the same time, and that's a tricky thing to figure out. You got to figure out how to kind of give us an apples to apples, right? This year versus next year.
Yeah, I think that some of the data collection we did throughout the school year was kind of just a snapshot of what feedback do you have, what are you noticing, what are you wondering what you need. And I do think that, you know, we brought some of that pre-post data for one unit, but it definitely is a goal to continue to look at that. What are students learning? What are they both reporting immediately following the lesson, and what are they using in practice? You know, how do we see them applying that? And so I think that there's a lot of ways that we can do program evaluation, and I think we just want to consider the pros and cons to all of those, wanting to make sure it focuses on teaching and learning and not over, you know, assessing. But we can definitely evaluate, you know, what does that look like from making sure that our teacher survey can be constant, so you can compare those numbers across the year, as well as student learning. So, you know, with support of moving into the fall of the school, we definitely want to make sure that we bring along the assessment piece as well.
To me, Mandy, one of the things that'd be nice to see is if we see through the assessment that we think some areas are doing better than others, does it correlate with learning, educational learning process and assessments associated with that? So is there a one-to-one correlation between an improved SEL environment and academic performance? But, you know, that'll take lots of years.
That's the intent, right? That's the goal.
Yep.
It does make me wonder, though, one of the items that we're going to talk about this evening coming up is our climate survey. And our climate survey, definitely at the building level, would address some of the school climate and how students feel and some of those pieces as far as their learning environment, which is where that correlation and connection comes to academic progress. So I think that there are connections and overlaps to many of the things that we're doing that might continue to shed light on the impact of implementation of SEL curriculum, whether it's ruler or any other in the future, right? Those are the pieces that we're looking for outcomes.
Well, and you introduced us to SIMS, right? I got that right? SIMS? Swiss. Thank you. Thank you. Swiss data and Swiss data and I think SIMS is something I work on. Swiss data and academic data as well. So, and I agree that it could take years to start to see that correlation, but and I'm sure you will look at those two sources, look at that data as we go through next year and see if we can see even if it's having an impact in the near term. So, yeah. So we got the metrics and the data established for what we're going to look at. Okay.
Am I hearing that we're okay to keep doing this work as long as we continue to, I mean, if the wheels come off, I mean, that's a little extreme, but if we start seeing that this is not making the progress we want, then we'll make adjustments as needed, but to continue this work for another year as we work through to see where we are from a parallel standpoint.
As a pilot.
Yeah.
And to me, one of the key things is as a pilot, because we report out and talk on it far more often than we do anything else. So as long as we continue to report out on the progress or the challenges, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. I would agree. This pilot and the report outs, and keep that in front of us and report out on it. And yeah, let's continue on. Mark or Dawn, any opinions?
I like the idea of
Larry? Okay. So clear direction to move forward as a pilot, and then we'll keep evaluating this on a frequent, periodic basis to see where we're at and what's working and what's not, and looking at the data, looking at the surveys and so forth. So good. Okay. Okay, anything else on ruler, anyone? Okay, we move on to book review updates. You taking this one?
Yeah, so I am just going to give kind of a general overview of how we got where we are with the report that is on our agenda this evening as an attachment, just by way of reminder, because there's been a couple books and I just want to make sure we're all starting in the same place. So Half of the Yellow Sun by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie was brought forward at the building level. Reconsideration of text form was filled out by the family with concerns about the explicit nature of content in the book. And the building administration, that actually came to the board as well, which is why I'm giving this report here. The first phase of that process is for building level administrators and teachers to convene, to review the paperwork that was submitted by the parents and look at where the book was placed. At the original time when the parents submitted the paperwork and shared their concerns with all of you, the board was at that time on a 21st century lit book club list. And so that is where books are chosen by students and they form book clubs and so forth. But it is a form of choice reading in our district, really at all levels, elementary, middle school, and high school. And this was in a 21st century lit class where we have 11th and 12th grade students. At the building level decision at that time was that they would replace the book on the book club list with another text, and that the book would remain on library shelves in the building. So that when I say library shelves, for various reasons, primarily American Library Association guidance. When I say library, that means library shelves in the classroom, library shelves in our school libraries as well, just for clarification's sake. At that time, then, that was appealed. So part of that, our book guideline process and the reconsideration of text process allows a parent to appeal that building decision, and that's when that appeal then comes to me. And that then initiates the formation of a committee to review the book, read the book in its entirety, which is part of also legal guidance around how to determine whether a book is in the right place or not in the right place, and if we should act in a different way. At that time, I then initiated the process for the first time where we would develop a review committee and a process by which we would use board policy to develop a rubric and so forth. The committee was developed then with the building administrators shared a class list from a 21st century class roster, if you will. And I started at the top of the alphabet calling parents to see if they would like to join us. So that was as scientific as it was. There's another book that we will talk about at a different time. And so because the book was also in 21st century lit, I started at the bottom of the list and started calling names until I had enough parents who were interested and willing to participate. There were 2 teachers who were identified by building administration, 3 parents that were identified by me. I served on the committee as a facilitator only, not any member who was sharing a formal recommendation. And then as you can see on the top of your report, there was a curriculum office representative, building administrator, and then as I mentioned, 2 teachers and 3 parents on the committee. By way of process, we initially had a first meeting via Zoom where I detailed the process that we would walk through, that the expectations were to read the book in its entirety, that they were going to be expected to complete a notes page as they read the book, to note any challenges that they might see with the book, as well as any merits of the book, and then make notes based on any other resources that they consulted during the review of the book. During that Zoom meeting, we also talked about the rubric that would be used in order to kind of submit their final recommendation. A big piece that evening and then at the beginning of our second meeting was really to talk about confidentiality, really trying to create a space where everybody felt as if they could share their opinions about the book in a safe place, and that we would honor all opinions, whether they were the same or different than our own. And so that was also kind of one of the purposes of that initial Zoom meeting, is to begin to set the stage for creating that environment where we met as a full team. The second meeting then was last week, and we went through introductions. Again, that focus of norms on confidentiality of we certainly can walk away from this book review process and share what happened in the room, but out of respect for really quite transparently what's happening across the country with books and the very strong opinions that we want to honor for all, that we would create a space where that would be honored and that we would have spaces to share. Then we moved into reviewing the reconsideration of text document that was submitted with the parent. In this particular situation, the parent had attached some excerpts from the book as well, and so that was attached to that reconsideration of form. The parent's name was omitted from the form that was submitted, again, for just trying to honor confidentiality, but the committee members were able to review what the parent submitted as far as their concerns. We then discussed the text at length. Again, they were required or expected to take notes on a page that shared all the merits that they found in the book and then any challenges that they found in the book. They used that paper, which I gathered at the end as evidence of the process that we followed and that was expected of the committee members. We used that at that time then to jot on individual sticky notes. So if I had a concern, it went on one colored sticky note. If I had a merit, it went on another sticky note. And then I walked through a protocol where if Dawn and I were partners, that I would share all my positive sticky notes with her, and she would take them. I would give them to her, and she would share the positive sticky notes with me, and then the same process for challenges with the book. At that time then, we gathered as a full group, and Dawn shared my sticky notes, but she didn't say these were Amy's sticky notes, right? We were trying to really honor that safe space of I'm not gonna share my notes, but we want all voices to be heard equally and honor all. And so all of the notes that you see attached to the final report are there. You can see that there's duplicates. I did not put them in any order. I literally took them from the chart paper and typed them up, and not omitting anything that the committee had shared as far as merits or concerns of the book. At that time, then we, after sharing of all of the merits and challenges that the group found in the book, We then reviewed the Hudsonville Public Schools Guidelines, Practices, and Guidance document. That is a document that was shared with all of you as a board on March 11th. And at that time, then it was time to complete the rubric. And so from, again, honoring all voices, each individual had their own individual rubric, no name was attached. They independently completed the rubric with the final recommendation at the bottom, folded it in half and set it over on the table. And then our final activity was really about reviewing the process, because it was the first time we had gone through a process like this, and we just had some open dialogue around positives and areas of improvement that they might have for the process moving forward, and that was also valuable as we always look to improve. So the overall report, as you can see up at the top, the roles of the committee members are represented, that yes, these roles of the committee were represented in the numbers next to them. The next portion of the rubric, I wonder if it may have created a little bit of confusion, so I just want to point it out. That portion of the rubric that is from board policy is only used if a book is a board-approved book or if it's a book club choice book. And because this book was being reviewed as a part of an appeal process for a library book, we did not use that portion of the rubric. As you can see, the general criteria then are from the American Library Association, and you can see that there were 7 votes. There were 7 members on the committee. There were 7 votes that marked each of those as criteria that they would agree with. The second part of that also notes the number next to each of the bullet points, that how the committee members voted. And then finally, the next area, again, the numbers quoted next to the bullet points, with the final recommendation unanimous that the book should be retained in its current location for its current purpose, meaning in our libraries. The next steps will be to communicate with you here this evening with step 1, communicate with the family who submitted the appeal. The committee who were members, again, they don't know what the outcome is either. They're the first to hear it this evening, and then also with building administration. So those are some of the next steps. Do you have any questions about the process?
Thanks for walking through that process and refreshing us on all the steps
Absolutely.
that were involved there.
Questions before. Is there anything in the process that the committee felt should be altered? I know you said there was good dialogue. Was there any major changes to the process, or just some slight modifications, like the volume of people? Should there be 2 more parents or 1 less parent? Or
because you're asking, I'm just going to share. I typed them up. So the positives were it was a good structure, the expectations were clear, the Zoom was helpful to explain the process, the guidance document with many resources was helpful. Inclusion of parents of students, the age of which would be potentially reading the book was helpful, and then the committee size. So to your question, they felt that that was a good number. Areas of improvement, one of the questions that the committee asked when we were talking about writing down the positives and then the concerns that they were confused about was the general tone in the committee was that they didn't have personal concerns about the book. And so their question was, if I don't have concerns about the book, like my child has read this book, I don't have problems with this book, how do I fill out the concerns? Am I writing concerns down that might be concerns for some students? Am I writing concerns down that might be concerns for some parents? And so we reached consensus that as a representative of this committee, representing all students and representing all parents and teachers and administrators, that their role was to really think about what some parents might see as challenges and what some students might see as challenges. And so that's the basis of the sticky notes that you see for concerns. So that was one area of the process that we chatted about. So I'll look to create that clarity at the onset of the next committee. The other area of improvement was consider expanding the process to include multiple requests for reconsideration before forming a committee. They felt that there was lots of time involved based on all the committee members that were present. Reading the book, it was a lengthy, dense text. And so they felt that it was a laborious process for just one parent requesting a review of the book. I'm not sure where we land on that. I think that that is part of what, in my opinion, is honoring our parents, and that is the process that we have set up. That if one parent fills out a reconsideration of text, and they're not happy with the board, or excuse me, the building level decision, that is the process, even if it is just one parent. And so we process through that. And then the final area of improvement was consider including the guidelines document with the reconsideration of text form to ensure that parents really understand First Amendment rights and some of those pieces that are contained within that book. And that might help parents when they're filling out the reconsideration of text form. So those were the areas of positives and then potential improvements.
Thoughts, questions, comments from the board?
Do we have any benchmark for sexual content for a book before it ever gets into the building? Because I know we have filters for our internet system here, and I asked myself, could the stuff in this book have gotten to one of our students through the internet? I'm just one person here, I'm not the whole committee. And I don't know if the committee was representative of the community or not. I know that when I've talked about this book to friends of mine, I can't even bring myself to use the words that are in the book. And I've heard a lot of words. I'm not picking on you, Amy. It's just you're the face of this, so I have to talk to you. One time, and I was in a discussion with one of my male friends, and I told him some of the words, but I will not discuss these words in mixed company. And as someone said this evening, if I were to use the language in this book in the workplace, I would be terminated. Yes. And how it gets here in the first place. I mean, we have a process, but I'm saying we should have some line of morality here where we wouldn't allow a book to even get in the first place, let alone be assessed. I said earlier on, this isn't literature, this is verbal pornography. And I'm grossly disappointed in the committee. I don't even know who the committee is, but I'm grossly disappointed in them that we can be on such completely different wavelengths about this. Because if we can't get through our filters for our internet, if I can't talk about it in the workplace without being terminated, then why would our students be reading this?
You know, the only thing and certainly this is a good place for discussion, right? So I'm going to offer some thinking based on some of the guidelines, right? That we've spent now over a year and a half really researching and getting feedback from legal guidance, American Library Association, trying to take what we continue to talk about, and we spent a long time talking about it in our last work session, is how do we take the subjectivity out of this? Because to your point, I think you're right. I think many people would feel the way that you do, Mr. Davis, and I think that there are many people who don't, which was representative of our committee, and so that's the sticky wicket of this whole conversation and this whole book debate that, quite frankly, isn't just happening here; it's happening across the country. And so when we look at some of the legal guidance and we look at vocabulary, if you will, like obscenity and prurient interest, which I have to look at the word every time I say it, and even the definition of pornography provided by True Law, those are some of the things that we're using to make the decisions and look at these documents, because that is what we are leaning back on when it comes to First Amendment rights. There are places and case law in our guidance document that also clearly articulate that school boards and entities have gotten themselves in a whole heap of trouble for censoring books and for not following legal guidance and definitions. So I guess that's where my brain goes, Mr. Davis, when you start to ask those questions, that we've really worked hard to take the subjectivity out of it, no, the objectivity out of it and make it subjective. And so that's what we continue to go back to, that it's not Amy's guidelines because I happen to be in the position overseeing the book guidelines in the district, but that it's really about American Library Association, First Amendment rights, which we get feedback from our attorneys on, and so forth. So that's the thinking that comes to my mind as you share that, because I think you're right. Many people would agree with you, and then we know that there are people who have different opinions, and it's the sticky wicket of talking about books.
It's not sticky to me, Amy.
Yeah, I understand.
And it's not censorship, because I'm happy for the content in terms of different cultures, different tensions, different conflicts. I'm happy to have that stuff in literature. But I don't want it to have the fill thing, too. I had a bowl of soup for dinner tonight. It was a good bowl of soup. But if there had been a fly or a bug in it, I wouldn't have eaten it.
Right.
And I feel like we're trying to justify good soup with bugs in it. And we shouldn't have to do
I
that.
guess that goes back to the process that was followed.
Hold on, let's have the discussion.
Yeah, I guess that goes back to the process that was followed from the very beginning, and so allowing the decision to fall on a committee that was formed in the way that I described, and that has a differing opinion maybe than what I'm hearing you say, Mark, is where we land. This is new to all of us, so I wish that I said, guess what, I've had the answer in my pocket the whole time, and here it is. I think that this is the messiness of it that we're going to have to continue to process and think through and adjust as we move forward, if possible.
What's the next step for the parent that did the request? Now, one parent did a formal request, but I think there were multiple parents that wanted to do the request. Maybe their child was not in the class. Is there an appeal process for the parents now?
There's not.
So, Ken, what's the purpose of the board?
Yeah,
What do you mean?
Like, can the parents do an appeal now to the Board of Ed?
Oh.
What is our role in all of this? That's what I don't know.
Do we have any say in this, or are we just figureheads?
Well, to me, we could talk about this. Now, to me, we have a responsibility to ensure that we have policy and procedure in place to guide the district, right? And that's our job as a board to ensure that the administrative team puts in place policy and procedure. And again, whichever side of the issue you fall on, policy and procedure, that guides the district, that guides the administrative team, and that we can also ensure the next board, and the next board, and the next board has in place. Because we want to leave something, we want to give guidance to the district going forward versus, I think, on each individual book. Now, so that's one piece. Now, the other piece, which you raised, Mark, was, and you're touching on again, is does the board, can the board set some moral threshold or some threshold that says, hey, somehow below here, we don't want this sort of language, right? This sort of language in the within books coming into the district. Above that, or maybe I got that backwards. We don't want this amount of language. We want less than this. Can we set some sort of policy? Can we set some sort of guidance for the administrative team and for the teaching team, the staff, that says, hey, boy, don't go here. Don't go here with this amount. Go here with books in this pool. And I think that's worthy of discussion. I think that's worthy of investigation. I don't know exactly how to draw that line yet, but I think that's something we got to do some more work on. So I think that in the policy that I believe that the policy that was put in place and then followed very diligently and thoroughly is a good policy that gives us a place to start from. That gives us a place to start from. In terms of a procedure that, again, we can provide to the district and we can give to future boards and superintendents and so forth. I think that other piece, Mark, is that threshold, that line above which, that's the piece that I think we need to explore that.
Yeah, we do, and Ken, at a previous board meeting, when this book first came up, you spoke against it.
Against the book?
You spoke against this specific book.
I expressed concerns about it, yeah.
You said you would fill out the form yourself.
Yeah, because I wanted to get it into the process. I wanted to get it into the process.
And somehow in the weeds of the process, we're missing common sense here. And I asked myself, is there any level beneath which we will not go, beneath which we will go?
But what if those three parents were sitting right here? What would you tell them?
I would like to talk to them.
I feel like the issue has become political. And it really shouldn't be. It's about what's really best for the students. And
I agree.
so like what themes do we want from the book? You know, what do we want the students to get out of the book? And then is there another book that didn't have sexual content that could meet those themes? It's interesting, on the discussion document, the very first comment was based on true and historic events. This book is fiction. So that concerned me. But it's interesting, after our meeting on March 28th, I went back and I actually emailed my librarian at Grand Valley and I said, I need help. Because over our spring break, I thought, what does the research show on all of this? And I couldn't find anything. So I emailed my librarian, I said, help me, I'm looking for research that talks about the effect of violence, language, and sex on students at K through 12. And so I have a health librarian, she reached out to the educational librarian, and I just really wanted to give a public shout out to Gail Schaub and Barbara Harvey, because they said there's not a lot out there. Some of it dates back to the 1970s, which we typically would not use, it's too outdated. So they did an extensive literature search for me. They came up with some articles. I haven't printed them. All I have are the reference citations. I haven't printed them. I haven't read them yet to find out what does the literature show. Because I was looking for literature. There's a lot of research that looks at video games, TV, movies, and it's not positive. But I wanted to focus only on literature. So I have like a page and a half of references. I haven't had time to look at it. It'll have to be after the semester concludes. But I wanted to see what does the literature show. So if this book stays in library, does it have a consent with it? I mean,
That would be my biggest concern, Barb. I think we've talked about it before, but I'm not even sure where we landed, that when a book that's controversial is in the library, what is the process by which you make sure parents who would object to their student being exposed have a way of safeguarding that from happening? And parents who don't have a problem with it, I'm not pleased to say I want to tell my child reading this literature.
I think that has been handled in the past in talking with the building administration and with teachers, that the parents reach out. So it goes back to some conversations we've had in the past of kind of that burden of responsibility, right? If there's a parent who wishes their child not to have access to 1,000 splendid suns, to reach out to the teacher, the building administration, and that partnership and process has been in place for forever. And that's who our teachers are. They want to work with parents and create those opportunities to come alongside. And using an example, there may have been, or I know of a situation where a parent had reached out to the administration and teachers to say they had a student had a parent die by suicide, and so they were ultimately triggered by reading about suicide, talking about suicide, and so of course our administration and teachers came alongside that parent and that child to say, yes, that is our job, is to protect. And if that family has that desire, that's what we've done and what we'll continue to do.
Does anybody know what the public libraries have in place? So in other words, if a 14-year-old went to the Rebecca Library, went to the Grand Rapids Library, and they pulled that book off the shelf, does anybody know what the process is there? Do they have a monitoring system? Do they have a coding system? I don't know the answer to that. Because obviously that's something that must be occurring on a daily basis. Where if a student pulled a book off the shelf, would the librarian question their choice? And do they have to have a parent permission slip? I don't know the answer to that.
Based on I mentioned last time that the regional group of curriculum leaders across Kent and Ottawa County that meet, based on dialogue in that group, no, there's not. And that would go along with First Amendment rights, and that students even have First Amendment rights. It would go along with intellectual freedom that probably our libraries are instituting doing the public arena.
I also think, to your point, it would be helpful if when a student did try to check out a book that may be considered questionable, that there is some kind of a I wouldn't say alert, I'm not thinking the lights are gonna flash and the alarms are gonna go off, but there's a hey, we gotta reach out to your parents first to make sure they're aware that you're doing it. Same thing they'll do now with this book in the classroom. It's not part of the book club, it's not required reading, it's not one of these recommended reading. It's on a shelf. If the kid grabs it for open reading, the teacher's gonna say, you know what, let me just reach out to make sure that you understand what this, and there's gonna be books like that are maybe, I don't know the content when they got on there, but there could be books that could be challenging based on content.
And that would be also part of some of the dialogue that I've had with teachers through this whole process, is that when a book that has particular content in it, using suicide as an example or something, or high violence, and they know that student, they get to know that student as a reader, and they say, oh, I don't know if you will like this book. There are checkout procedures in each of our classrooms so that the teacher can keep a pulse on what is it that my students are reading, and then to be able to keep a pulse on it, like Dr. Vandercheck said, around reaching out to parents or alerting, talking with the student about the text in whatever capacity of concern it might be.
So should we, yes, go ahead.
This, another fundamental concern I have with this whole issue here. I've worked in I'm an old man now, I've worked in different formats, in business and insurance and in the church and in school. And I've had projects I wanted to succeed in. And when I have a project I want to succeed in, I try to find the way I can get it done with the least possible pushback, making it as easy as possible to get it done, as least controversial as possible. But I feel like this book has become the Holy Grail. And we're going to die in this mountain for this book, or somebody's going to die in this mountain for this book. I'm thinking there has to have been in somebody's mind an educational objective we wanted to accomplish. And I want to talk to that person. What was the educational objective they wanted to accomplish with that book? And then tell me why that was the only book under God's heaven that they could find to accomplish that. And that's my problem here, because I just don't want this problem to go on and on and on, because it can.
Right.
And if the teacher or the department chair or the superintendent or the principal, whoever has an objective, then find the book that is the least controversial. We're not here to die on mountains. And get that book in here and get the other ones gone. Anyways.
So some, let me float these out there. Some specific thoughts. You know, I heard, should there be an appeal process to the board after that? So we can talk about that. Should we expand the number of parents on the committee? You know, to get a broader, and I know Amy, there's a limit. It's like, wow, there's a lot to work with, but if it's 10, you know, I don't know what the numbers. But should we expand the number of parents? Should there be a board member on this, sitting on the committee? I don't know if that's right or not. I'm kind of picking up things and saying, what is suggestions for improvements?
My initial response to that is no.
Not
There
if
should
you were
not be
part
a
of
board
the
member on
process.
any subcommittee, except just to listen. Anyhow, I'll stop talking.
Yeah. Another, as you just said, part of that process of evaluating the book the first time and then appealing should involve the instructional leader, the teacher or the department chair or somebody, coming back to your point, Mark, and saying, here's what is so critical from a learning standpoint about this book. And and here are 2 or 3 other books that could potentially achieve that. So they have to bring a clarity around what that objective is and alternatives to that. And that doesn't seem like that would be too challenging.
And that was part of the building process and procedure, which they chose a different text. They replaced half of the Yellow Sun, Tucson book, half of the Yellow Sun with another text. That was part of that process of saying, we can accomplish this with a different text. And so those are healthy conversations that are having, and that we will continue to have around. There's lots of authors, there's lots of texts with appropriate content for all learners that need to be on our book club lists, going back to that as the primary.
And then could we extend that? Could we extend that to, again, there's repeal process, the appeal process, and evaluate that for when the books is on the shelf or not? Does that?
On the library shelf?
Yeah. Maybe you don't have to answer that now, just think about that too.
I think the hang up in my head is that when we have a library full of thousands of books,
sure,
there's lots of different reasons that it might be on the shelf. That one, I'm processing that.
Yeah, think about that.
I think that when we're talking about a whole class novel that's board approved or a book on a book club list, that's different to me than the thousands and thousands of books that are in a library.
Sure.
But,
yeah. Okay, so those are some specific suggestions to kind of, because I agree with you. We all want to move forward with this, and we all want a healthy and process, to Amy's point, that honors parents. And there were 3 parents on the committee that said, I'm fine with this book. And so we want to honor them. We want to honor the concerns of other parents. I mean, we want to do that. And I agree with you that there are a plethora of texts, and understanding what another text may be that achieves the same educational objective as this text, I think is a worthy conversation to have as part of this whole procedure. I hear you, Mark, and I am procedure. I am about that. You know that. I am about that because I think it's so important to give a baseline and also to give direction to future parents, teachers, administrators, superintendents, and so forth. So I'm a huge believer in that. But procedures are made to be improved as well. And I think we evaluate some of these options. So Amy, moving forward, Amy, can you, and I can connect with you after if you didn't catch those, but can we evaluate those and come back in a future work session or have a separate meeting or something, connect on these and say, hey, okay, we looked at the process, we looked at it, we considered some of these.
Absolutely.
We've heard what the board has said.
Absolutely.
Let's see if we can make some changes.
Our review process for 1,000 Splendid Sons, we meet in review committee next week. So the May, I got my months right, the May work session, we'll be talking about that. So that'll be a natural time to revisit some of this as well. And if we've made any modifications, then we'll move forward.
Good.
Amy, just for my own knowledge, in this library, this media room, is there someone that works in here, like if students want to check out books, is there someone that checks them out, or do they just do something on their own?
There is someone who checks students out. It's a media parapro.
So one option is, because we always talk about libraries, so when I think of a library, I think of a library like this, but we have all these classroom libraries.
Right.
So one option is if these controversial books are not in a classroom, but in a setting like this, and they go to check it out and there's a tag or something, they have to get parent approval. If there is someone that works in here.
There is someone.
Okay. Other thoughts? I don't want to leave this too quickly. I don't want to leave this without everybody having a chance. Yes.
Just 2 more quick ones here. There has to be an appeal process. I know.
An appeal to the appeal? I know what you're saying.
There has to be an appeal. I know that you're supposed to be the end result here, but there has to be an appeal beyond you. Because ultimately, the board is responsible for the curriculum.
Curriculum material, yep.
And so there has to be an appeal. We can't simply say that it ends with Amy and blame everything on Amy.
Yeah.
There has to be an appeal beyond that.
And we mentioned that, appeal to the board, perhaps an appeal to a subcommittee of the board or something.
But can it? I mean, my question is if it's not part of the curriculum that's required, can we do that from a legal perspective?
We have to.
Can we do that? When we became board members, we said that we would follow the Constitution of the United States and the state of Michigan. And what I'm saying, Mark, I'm not arguing with you from a moral perspective. I'm saying, as a board member, we have to follow what the current laws are. And so what I'm saying is, does Amy or the board or anyone have the right to say for a book that is not mandatory or a choice book, but is on the library shelf here, do we have the legal right to do that, other than saying, we're just going to do it? And that would be the question that I think Amy needs to feel comfortable with, and I think as board members we do. Because again, we can say we want to be that district that calls in the ACLU and are in the newspaper and we end up getting sued. I don't want that. You don't want that. So I don't think it's fair to give direction to administration that may circumvent the law. So let's just please keep that in mind. If it's possible, great. But if that appeal process means we're removing books, which is against the law, then I'm uncomfortable with that because I took an oath.
Either way, not to argue you down, but either way, that would be on the back of the board. The board have to take responsibility for that. Because ultimately, we are responsible for curriculum.
But I don't know that I would consider that curriculum. That's the thing that I'm a little confused about because no one's requiring that a student go to the library and get a book. So is that considered curriculum?
It's probably the policy manual, but I'm not the authority of the policy manual.
So with all due respect to both of you, I would argue that we don't have that knowledge here on this table. And that we need, as part of the process, and I think it's a fair points, but I think as part of the process, we've got to get that legal, which I know you've talked to the lawyers a lot, we've got to get that legal assessment as well, in terms of what we can and cannot do around an appeal process to the board specifically, or some subcommittee of the board, or some structure of the board. So,
I want to commend you,
Okay.
Amy, for respecting the members of the review committee to keep things confidential because no one wants to be on the front end.
right.
Important part. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. Good. Other questions or comments, thoughts about this from the board?
Mark, did you have one more? You said you had two quick ones.
I think I combined them.
Just want to make sure we're going
Steve, anything?
No, I would agree. This, we're trying to adjust our policy and trying to refine it to match what we believe is a district. And none of these are perfect out of the chute, but I see us making progress, and I see us trying to be serious about this and to try and take care of parents' concerns on both sides. At the same time, allowing a parent to check their child if they don't want them exposed to something. So I think that's all very important, and I think we've made a step towards making it better.
Larry, comments? Anything?
Well, I would just say I was an elementary teacher, and I read a book one time, it had haunted in the title, and in the last chapter, what one of the characters thought was a ghost playing an organ was actually a grandmother of somebody else. But I did have one mother call me because her boy was having nightmares. And so I just allowed him to go out into the hallway, and because even when I was reading a book, they could do their homework or whatever. But that's the only instance in my 36 years of education at the elementary level, unless maybe Steve was scared of some of the books I read, but I don't think so. But yeah, I mean, this is, I've read enough about that yellow book that there is no excuse for some of those things that are in there. That our high school, all of you out there, can make a choice to read that book if you want, but there's no excuse for high school kids to be exposed to it.
All right. Yeah, and in my 20 years or so on the board, I mean, this is the most serious and in-depth discussion we've had about this topic. And that's a good thing, and that's a healthy thing. And we're moving forward as a district, and we're learning as we go, and we'll get better. We'll get better. I firmly believe that.
I do want to commend Amy and work only because we got into this process for a book that was part of a book club without I would say an adequate description for parents to sign off on, and potentially maybe not a process that was followed, and it has come full circle. The book is no longer on the book club. The detailed descriptions of the books that are now on the book club, parents are involved in the conversation where before it was taking place. And I commend Amy and the English department for taking this seriously and say, listen, we gotta look at this and not make it a required reading. So if there's one book on the shelf that a parent might want their kid to read, that's choice. It's not a recommendation, it's not a here's this is the book you might like, it's on the shelf. So, and we have a lot of books on the shelf. I mean, you'll find the Bible on many of our shelves in our classroom libraries, and that's a choice, and there's nothing wrong with it. So I just appreciate the work. It's been a lot, and it's a very important conversation.
Okay, so we're coming out of this with some specific thoughts on how to alter the process to move forward, and we'll continue to evaluate those as we go forward. And again, appreciate all your work and all your help on this. So, okay, nothing else on that? Okay, we move on to security system renovation now. And Patrick, are you taking this?
Thank you, yes. So there were 3 attachments for this item, and I'm just going to speak a little bit over them, and then I'll go to each of them. But just when we took on the work for the 2019 bond vote, but it's the 2020 bond, this security system was known to be an issue. This is the card readers you see when you go to the buildings. We knew it in 2015. I'm not sure how far before 2015, but we knew this system needed to be replaced. And why? Why? It's one of those systems that served us well, but it's a legacy system, very proprietary. The programming of it, to find parts for it, is a big challenge. It doesn't, I would use a metaphor, it doesn't play well with others, it doesn't integrate. It's a system that met its need, really doesn't owe us anything. We used it for so long, but it just doesn't meet the needs of a district our size. And with the complexity, community ed usage at night, it's really, really a challenge for us to change the access. There are a lot of schools that you can do so many things with these cards. You can set the card up so you can badge it twice in some places, and it'll do certain things to the door. You can give people, we can still give people 1-day rights or 2-hour rights, but it's a lot of programming, and it literally is programming on our person in the tech department who knows how to use this system. So we're spending a lot of money on old parts, and so we're, with the addition of the connector here for the high school campuses and the addition of the 5-6 space, it really became time to replace this old system. And nothing, I don't want to speak to that system, it served us well, speak against it, but just, it's time.
When was it installed then, the old system?
I don't know exactly.
10 years?
It's older than 10.
Okay. It's forever in technology.
Yeah, it probably, I would.
That's okay, yeah, it's old.
Far
Yeah,
older
it's old,
than
it's
10 years.
old in technology.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a lot of things in that, and when we talk about a building, we don't talk about everything that goes into the building, so I will spare you from the weeds, but just a couple of the high points. There's hardware in the back closet that needs to be replaced. There's some connectors that need to be replaced. There's some card readers that need to be replaced. There's some cards that need to be replaced. Aaron is here from Communications by Design. He can talk about all those things at a level it's frankly amazing. He's done a great job. We call them CBD, but Communications by Design has helped us with several projects on our that are technology specific related on bond. They sat with us through Dr. Vanderjack has quoted a number, but well over 100 to 200 or more Zoom meetings in design. They sat with us through that. This was one of those projects that has been mentioned we've piloted different systems in different buildings. So, it does include, as I said, it does include the scope for the high school and the 5-6 building. It replaces that old Vanderbilt system. It'll just, so now to refer you to some specific attachments. The bid tab, if you could turn to that. It's always nice when we see a tight range, and we did get 4 bidders. There's a lot. I think we had 7 or 8 interested bidders, and we got 4 bids. One of the bidders included sales tax in their bid, and the reason for that has to do with there are certain projects that they must charge us sales tax on, and there's certain that qualify for more loose equipment that they don't have to charge us sales tax on. This vendor, Parkway Electric, does a lot of what I would call brick and mortar type work as a classic electrician. When those things go into a normal school building, we can charge sales tax. Like if they're giving the bill to OAK and it's running through that process, you add sales tax. If you don't, so they include sales tax, they didn't include sales tax. If we deduct sales tax from their bid, they become the low bidder. Parkway is doing a lot of work for us right now on several projects, and they would become the low bidder over AOB security systems from Farmington Hills, Michigan. The bid, our budget, and I would say our budget for this project, base bid, was closer to $500,000. So we feel we had very favorable pricing just on that base bid line. And that pricing comes from what CBD and others see in the market across the state. They do work statewide. And when Aram, he was thinking a little bit about sticker shock, took me aside just before we did our first bid meeting. He said, "Hey Pat, this could be over $500,000 just for the base bid." And I said, well, that doesn't surprise me because we're touching so many buildings, so many spaces, so many controllers. But thanks for letting me know. So we do believe we got favorable pricing. In the attachment, it's got a few lines on it like this. Talks in more detail about the alternates. We've always wanted to replace our existing cards, and these cards are expensive. So this would be the $20,000 is to replace all the cards across the district. The $75,000 gives us added security. It wasn't mandatory in the project, but right now the security, the level of encryption which means the level of encryption of these cards isn't up to industry specification. I think Aaron would say it goes from 26 to 31 or 26 to 32, but it makes it far harder to hack the card. And then the other alternate on there is the integration of that into the security system, bringing the total recommendation up to $530,037.90. We are still, because we opened these bids Friday, we have been checking references. Parkway has solid references in a number of areas. They've done a number of projects for us already, and we're going to continue to check references into this specific work. But our expectation right now is that on May 12th, there'll be a recommendation for Parkway with these alternates in the amount of $530,000.
So we're talking about encryption, so security, and then we're talking about integration, both of the current credentials, tell me if I'm using the wrong words, and the video monitoring system.
Not the video, not specifically. That's just an integration into that system.
Yeah.
We're not going to replace that.
No, I understand.
Yes.
That's what it is. It's an integration into that system. So is that what am I asking? If you were to say, what are the top 3 to 4 things that we want this new system to do. So encryption is one. We want it to be a safer system that is much more difficult to hack into. So I got that. What else? What are the other top 2 that you'd say? It's got to integrate. So I'm kind of answering my own question. But what's the next 2?
Like Pat mentioned, there's the open platform technology that's able to scale into the future. Right now, we're kind of with the older system. It's adding proprietary systems that to an aging system. So this will allow forward movement, adding new panels, card readers that play well with any type of software. So if there's any changes into the software partner that we or vendor that we're partnering with in the future, they lose support or something like that, it can be easily switched, and you can maintain all of the equipment without having to swap out, like we're doing with an older system. We have to swap out the old equipment. So that would be one of the major factors, the encryption, and then the tying into the video monitoring system will allow events that happen in the access control system to be also a visual event as well, tying into the camera system.
I got you. Yeah. Okay.
Is each building administered and managed separately, or is there a central management point?
With the new system, it'd be central managed, yeah.
Is that the difference?
Over the net, it's network based, which we know that the network's being, it's more and more important each day, each year. So all of this will be a network technology.
Is that a change from the old to the new system?
They're
managed at the building level now?
It can be managed centrally. It's just, it's programming. It's really not something that is plug and play. We only have a few people that can do it. Maybe we could train more people to do it, but it's just a significant amount of staff time, and it's not as fluid as it really should be. It's not. It just shouldn't be this much work to change access.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's centrally managed, but is control distributed? So let's say we lost interconnectability, will we still be able to have security?
Yes. Yep. All programming is maintained at each panel.
Okay.
Yep.
So you still do, you haven't settled on Parkway. I mean, it looks like Parkway may rise to the top here for a couple of reasons, cost, and we're currently working with them on a number of aspects of the project. But we'll see the final recommendation in May.
It's all but, it's just, we just have more, we usually take more time to do more background checks into this part of the work.
Okay. Other questions or comments on the security system renovation? All right, thank you. Good update. Thanks for coming in and answering our questions. Yeah, and thanks for coming along in the process as well, because there's a level of expertise here that, well, some of us have, but some of us don't. So thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we move on to Alward principal search.
Okay, just an update about where we're at. The goal is to bring candidates' recommendation at the May health board meeting. So I have surveyed the Alward staff in regards to what they're kind of looking for in a future leader. They want a home in that. So, but we'll find a great one no matter what. But 3 things that really stood out were I was really solid communicator, someone that's really flexible and quick on the feet and adaptable, and then someone that has a strong knowledge of special education, just because of the programming that we have at Alward. So we had 23 applicants, and kind of using that lens and filter, I invited 14 applicants to share with me, and with me just like a video, and then a subcommittee of my committee looked at those videos, and we narrowed it down to 6 candidates. And so they're coming in this week to meet with support staff, certified staff, parent, and administration. And then hopefully from that 6 we'll send it on to to the building to meet school visits, classroom, and just same processes as James on Upper and all the other great candidates that we have now had as principals. So we're going to do that, and then hopefully we'll be able to bring you a great, strong candidate for recommendation from the top. So that's where we're at.
Questions, comments?
Any of those inside candidates of the 6?
No.
Okay.
No, we did not have any of them.
Maybe we'll lose another person at least.
Yeah, I know, right? No. Yeah. What's unique about Alward right now is that they had 6 new staff members last year, and they're on target to get 7 new this year. And then, the 5-6 building opening up, they're going to lose their whole 5th grade staff. So it's hard to balance. I mean, it's not hard for me, but I just want to make sure I honor the Alward staff at the same time. They just have different needs right now, and they're turning over. So it's and I always say that the principal hire is for the staff and students and parents of Alward, for sure. But then we're also part of our administrative team, So it's kind of it's a big hire, as you guys know. So that's where we're at.
Good.
Yep.
Questions, comments on that? Anything else? All right, last item before closed session is the climate survey.
Yeah, so last fall we did a climate survey. We reached out to our elementary students, our middle school, high school students, our parents, staff, and asked them a series of questions. Just wanted to share that with the board again. You had some recommendations last year. We'd like to send out the exact same survey. Kind of see where we are in parallel to where we're in the fall, what things we need to continue to work on, maybe what things we need to start working on or stop working on. And then the only change to the last survey is in our secondary survey, middle school and high school students, we added an open-ended question. Just what are the things you want to share with us? It could be interesting to get feedback open-ended from middle school and high school students, but we'll get some good information from that. So same survey with the parents, there'll be open-ended questions to parents also, and with our staff, and then try to look at where we're in the fall, where we are now, and see what we can continue to work on. So I want to share it with the board, and I know you've seen it before, nothing's changed. I just want to bring that to your attention. We'd like to get that out probably in the month of May, and get it out to our parents, obviously our students, but get out to our parents at the same time. So that over the summer, we can do some reflecting.
So our cadence is going to be May and...
Well, we did it in the fall, and
Yeah.
we'll do it in May. I don't know if we'll do this every 6 months.
Okay.
I think when we want to get some feedback where we were and where we are.
Okay.
But just want to, when we talked about this in the fall, our intent was to do this again in the spring so we can see kind of where we were.
Okay, and we'll evaluate if we
Yeah.
do it yearly,
Yeah.
every 6 months.
Yeah. Yeah. And just on that note, we had an extensive conversation today, but we are looking at also gathering feedback from administrators, from the teachers, about administration and central office, getting feedback from our staff too about what do they like, what do they want to see keep working on, what things we stop, those kind of things. So May is going to be a big month for gathering feedback before people leave for the summer, so it gives us really some focus over the summer and making good plans.
Okay.
Dr. Banjak, one of the things maybe I misunderstood when I read through it this time, but when you're doing the parent survey, let's say you had a child or you had children in elementary, middle, and high school, all 3 areas. When you get to the second half, it says pick one of your children. How do you know which age group it's referring to then?
So I think the intent was I wouldn't say pick your favorite kid. I'm not saying that parents have a favorite kid, but pick something that is the overall theme that can answer some of those questions based on conversations you have with the student. And I think all in all, based on the volume of data we get from parents, it still gives us a good frame of reference to the feedback. So as opposed to filling it out 3 to 5 times based on how many kids you have, or once, if you have one child still in the district, I think it gave us the overarching theme how the parents felt the district was addressing some of the content that's in the survey. Good question.
Other questions, comments on the climate survey? Okay, that's all the open items, discussion items we had. Are we staying here for closed session, or are we moving to a...
We can go down the hall.
Okay, so we'll go down the hall. So I would guess, you're welcome to stay, folks. We're going to go into closed session. I would guess it's going to be an hour. maybe a little over an hour, just my guess.
I hope not.
So you're welcome to stay, we're gonna come back, we'll do a board roundtable, and then we'll adjourn. Otherwise, thank you for coming this evening, we do appreciate your attendance and your comments, so. Okay, with that, can I have a motion to go into closed session? Motion by Don, support from Barb, roll call. Yes? We are in closed session, and we will move down the hall. Okay, we're out of closed session. We took that motion in the other room, so we'll do a round table. Dr. Manajek, anything else? Andy? Yeah, anything else? Mr.
I
Davis?
just get concerned people can't hear us, even in this room, they have trouble hearing us out there.
That's true.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I wonder if we could do microphones.
We can investigate what we can do there.
Okay.
I'm looking at Keith, Keith's making.
I'll investigate what we can do. There's not an easy answer right now for that. We're working on something, but we've been working on it. It's just, I can blame supply chain, but it seems like everybody's blaming supply chain right now.
Microphones, whatever works.
Okay, all right, good point.
That's all I got.
In the meantime, we'll talk louder, so. Larry, anything?
I'm good.
Set.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, sir. With that, may I have a motion to adjourn, please?
I'll move that.
Motion by Mark, support from Steve. All in favor, say yes.
Yes.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.